Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.
Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight, and it's Friday, April the 5th, 2013. If you're a bad guy and you put on a uniform, you just get worse. So we need to have some good officers who are going to stand up like the whistleblower who released that. So when we see things like this, we have to ask ourselves, are we falling into the same kind of tyranny that we've seen over and over again throughout history? Well, Alex Jones takes a deeper look at this very question.
I want you to listen to me very, very carefully, because we are all in grave danger. A dire warning for every man, woman, and child, not just in the U.S., but worldwide. I have studied the 20th century, and I've studied tyrannies that came before it. And the exact pattern followed in Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, Communist China, the list goes on and on. The exact pattern that was followed in those nations is now being established here. Do you think in Nazi Germany, in the first 6-7 years of the Nazis, that it was in the news that oppressive bad things were happening or that people were disappearing? No. Do you think from the time that Lenin was in power and decades later Joseph Stalin, do you think it was in the Russian news that the government was being oppressive and sending people to gulags and taking their children for minor offenses? No. The state-controlled and state-run media was promoting it as a good thing. Now, we've talked a lot about how millions of veterans are getting letters saying you have to turn your firearms in. No judge, no jury, no psychological evaluation, no nothing. Turn your guns in. Others are being raided without warrants. Their guns are being confiscated. They're being put in psychiatric facilities and are being billed for it, and then being told you won't be released unless you sign papers agreeing that you're mentally ill. I've interviewed them. You've seen it in your local news. It is a purge that's happening.
The hospital, my primary care physician called to have a wellness check placed on me, and the local police perform a wellness check. Well, the local police came up, and there was nothing wrong with me. I had no, there was no anxiety. I wasn't combative. I basically, but I wasn't with anybody, so I had no witnesses, and they didn't have a warrant, and they, through intimidation, forcefully commandeered my vehicle and entered my home, searched and seized my weapons, and then, carted me away in an ambulance to a psychiatric evaluation, which I was held for 72 hours.
And Homeland Security says veterans, returning veterans, are the #1 terror threat, when statistically they have one of the lowest crime rates. This is a group being demonized. You've seen where Illinois has tried to put people in jail for life for filming or taping police in public, something completely protected under the First Amendment.
75 years behind bars. A prison sentence that long is rarely handed down, and it's usually just for murderers or rapists. But a local man faces 75 years in prison for a nonviolent crime. What he's accused of doing is something many people have done, but most don't realize it's actually illegal.
It's a felony if you're taping.
You guys are public
and recording.
A dozen states are using eavesdropping and wiretapping laws to arrest people who record audio of law enforcement without their permission.
I'm not shutting it off. Officer.
Well, you're going to jail.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a new case where a family reportedly went to a anti-government rally, and so the police raided them over it and found marijuana. And so, because they allegedly had marijuana with their children were taken by the government. Now, the family got their children back at gunpoint, allegedly, and have fled, And the CNN headline doesn't even say it's the parents. They just say that anti-government people have taken children from a home, and there's an Amber Alert.
These signs are up right now. An Amber Alert has been issued by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Police believe Chase and Cole Haken are with their parents, Joshua and Sharon Haken, who police are calling armed and dangerous.
Then they talk to the neighbors in the local newspaper there in Florida, and they say they were such a nice family, such sweet people. We don't know what happened to them. Well, they have the normal mammal instinct to protect their children.
The boys were taken from their grandmother's house in Lake Magdalene. That is in Hillsborough County. According to investigators, the couple lost custody of the two boys after an anti-government rally in Louisiana.
Right now, this family is, quote, on the run, but there's another chapter to all of this.
They are waiting for a judge to sign off on a search warrant before going inside. Once they do, and hopefully soon, they're going to be finding some clues, they hope, about where Haken and, more importantly, his children, where they might be.
The local newscasts go and show an Infowars.com bumper sticker when they talk about anti-government to try to associate people that realize we have an occupational government with collaborators running it of foreign banks that have taken over. Trying to associate those of us that are real Americans and are aware of what's happening with terrorism or kidnapping children. Anti-government people steal kids, kidnap kids out of home. Don't say it's their parents. By the way, these parents are both engineers with no criminal records in an upper middle class area.
Police across the state searching for two young boys.
Officials issued an Amber Alert yesterday. They believe the children were kidnapped by their own father.
The police were targeting people that went to a Tea Party rally, this is all on record, and supposedly found them with marijuana. Ladies and gentlemen, they're going to take your children. Think of the ultimate crime of that from good families over marijuana.
We're also learning some new details about the family. The father, Joshua Haken, was arrested a year ago in Louisiana on drug charges.
Amber Alert search continues for two boys abducted from grandmother's home by anti-government parents. And the headline shouldn't be anti-government people grab kids out of home. It should be authoritarian government kidnaps children over petty pot charge and parents fight back. This is how they're going to disappear everybody for marijuana or being anti-government or filming police in public. This is how tyrannies work. In the first phases, they just start arresting people and throwing the book at them because they love liberty. Later, then, they start arresting people en masse, but only after they have their national ID cards and their cashless society. And that's what's now going into place. Homeland Security is the foreign Army. It is the fifth branch of the U.S. military under foreign globalist control, openly saying veterans, conservatives, libertarians, gun owners, Tea Party people in the Feders are terrorists. Well, you know what? We're not terrorists. The globalists are the ones funding Al-Qaeda worldwide in Libya and Syria. They're the ones using Al-Qaeda to menace us, to then set up a police state and take our rights. And they're now claiming, don't worry about Al-Qaeda, worry about the American people. You're seeing an authoritarian criminal takeover. They're going to push us and push us and push us until we stand up against them, and then they're going to call us terrorists. And then they're going to blow up federal buildings and say we did it, to try to get the general public in a cowardly fashion to go along with it. And I want to tell the cowardly public something. Giving into this tyranny ensures they're going to take all your private pension funds, your public pension funds, and your bank accounts. That's now all being announced. And so go ahead and serve it. You're going to bring in our destruction. Your cowardice, your sheep-like behavior invited every wolf on the planet to come here to feed on the joke that America's turned into. I want America to pull up, to stop trusting government, and to get in the face of these bureaucrats and to take action against them politically before it turns into a physical shooting war. And if you don't like that, you're not an American, because that's what this country was founded on.
Even bin Laden's displays of strength for the Western media were fake. The fighters in this video had been hired for the day and told to bring their own weapons. For beyond his own small group, bin Laden had no formal organisation, until the Americans invented one for him. In January 2001, a trial began in the Manhattan court of 4 men accused of the embassy bombings in East Africa. But the Americans had also decided to prosecute bin Laden in his absence. To do this under American law, the prosecutors needed evidence of a criminal organisation, because as with the mafia, that would allow them to prosecute the head of the organisation, even if he could not be linked directly to the crime. And the evidence for that organisation was provided for them by an ex-associate of Bin Laden's called Jamal Al-Qaeda.
During the investigation of the 1998 bombings, there is a walk-in source, Jamal Al-Fadl, who's a Sudanese militant who was with Bin Laden in the early 90s, who has been passed around a whole series of Middle Eastern secret services, none of whom want much to do with it, who ends up in America and is taken on by the American government effectively as the key prosecution witness, and given a huge amount of American taxpayers' money at the same time. His account is used as raw material to build up a picture of Al-Qaeda. The picture the FBI wants to build up is one that will fit the existing laws that they will have to prosecute those responsible for the bombing. Now, those laws were drawn up to counteract organised crime, the mafia, drugs crime, crimes where people being a member of an organisation is extremely important. You have to have an organisation to get a prosecution. And you have Al-Fadl and a number of other witnesses, a number of other sources, who are happy to feed into this, who've got material that, looked at in a certain way, can be seen to show this organisation's existence. You put the two together and you get what is the first Bin Laden myth, the first Al-Qaeda myth, and because it's one of the first, it's extremely influential.
The picture Al-Fadl drew for the Americans of Bin Laden was of an all-powerful figure at the head of a large terrorist network that had an organised hierarchy of control. He also said that Bin Laden had given this network a name, Al-Qaeda. It was a dramatic and powerful picture of Bin Laden, but it bore little relationship to the truth. The reality was that Bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri had become the focus of a loose association of disillusioned Islamist militants who were attracted by the new strategy. But there was no organisation. These were militants who mostly planned their own operations and looked to Bin Laden for funding and assistance. He was not their commander. There is also no evidence that Bin Laden used the term Al-Qaeda to refer to the name of a group until after September the 11th, when he realised that this was the term the Americans had given him. In December, the Northern Alliance told the Americans that Bin Laden was hiding in the mountains of Tora Bora. They were convinced they had found the heart of his organisation.
The search for Osama bin Laden, there was constant discussion about him hiding out in caves, and I think many times the American people have a perception that it's a little hole dug out of a side of a mountain.
Oh, no.
This is it. This is a fortress.
Yes.
A complex, multi-tiered, bedrooms and offices on the top, as you can see. Secret exits on the side and on the bottom. Cut deep to avoid thermal detection. A ventilation system to allow people to breathe and to carry on. The entrance is large enough to drive trucks and even tanks. Even computer systems and telephone systems. It's a very sophisticated operation.
Oh, you bet. This is serious business. And there's not one of those. There are many of those.
For days, the Americans bombed the mountains at Tora Bora with the most powerful weapons they had. The Northern Alliance have been paid more than $1 million for their help and information. And now, their fighters set off up the mountains to storm Bin Laden's fortress and bring back the Al-Qaeda terrorists and their leader. But all they found were a few small caves, which were either empty or had been used to store ammunition. There was no underground bunker system, no secret tunnels. The fortress didn't exist. The Northern Alliance did produce some prisoners they claimed were Al-Qaeda fighters, but there was no proof of this. And one rumour was that the Northern Alliance was simply kidnapping anyone who looked remotely like an Arab and selling them to the Americans for yet more money. The Americans now began to search all the caves in all the mountains of eastern Afghanistan for the hidden Al-Qaeda network.